Billy Blue, my knight in shining brindle. Welcome to another episode of A Poet Reads to Write. Today I would like to look at this magnificent novel by Robert Holdstock, a UK fantasy writer from the 1980s and before. Mythago Wood, this beginning of this great cycle of fantasy novels that he wrote. This book was first published in 1984. I don't think Robert Holdstock is read enough today. It's not a perfect novel. It has some weaknesses which we will talk about soon. But it is a magnificent beast of a thing. And I'm so pleased that the Folio Society of London has chosen to reissue this magnificent book in this deluxe limited edition. It's so lovely that Robert Holdstock and writers like him are coming back into print and are available again for readers. This is a really, really interesting work of fantasy. It is not YA at all. It's certainly an adult fantasy. And it is probably best described as mythic fantasy or even as Jungian fantasy. You know, if that doesn't get you going, what else would? This is very different. You know, it's not the adult fantasy of George Martin, for example. There's little of that fetishized violence and waste and loss, that sexual violence that so saturates the world of George Martin. You know, this is an adult fantasy, but it's not in that vein at all. This is a very different type of thing. It really is best described as mythic or Jungian fantasy. You know, looking at those great archetypes of the brain and how they can enter into this almost magical realist or fantasy world. So what has the Folio Society come up with? Well, you can see this very brown, interesting type cover with the gold here of the Mythago, this, you know, the first archetypal beast that we get introduced to with the antlered heads here, if you can see that. It's a marvelous front cover. Very brown, you know, very much of the earth, going back to that world of Mythago Wood. You know, this is a book that celebrates a great forest, a great primeval or Celtic forest. It's an amazing thing. Opening it up and look at these end papers, again with some of the great archetypal or Mythago beasts that inhabit this world. It's an astounding thing, I think. It's just a treasure to open up a book like this, to spend time with it. Here's the first illustration of the book. The illustrations are by a guy and another UK artist called John Howe. And John Howe was actually a close friend, apparently, at the end of his life of Robert Holdstock. And John Howe, as well as doing the illustrations and signing this book for me, as well as doing the illustrations to this, John Howe has also written the foreword, in which he, you know, introduces us to the person of Robert Holdstock and what he was like as a human being, and of his friendship with Robert Holdstock at the end of Holdstock's life. It's a marvelous little foreword, very interesting to read, very generous. I love it. This novel, Mythago Wood, is divided into 3 parts, and with this folio edition, each part is introduced by a magnificent black and white image like this, a beautifully, very delicately drawn image. It's quite marvelous, I think. And then here are some more images of one of the Mythagos, one of the great archetypal beasts, these primeval archetypal beasts that inhabit the world of this fantasy novel. It's a great thing, isn't it? The illustrations are really interesting. Here is a very important character who we get introduced to in the world of the novel, Guy Weneth, which is a type, I suppose, an archetypal type of a manifestation of Queen Guinevere from the Arthurian cycle, I guess. But Gwyneth in this manifestation is much more a Celtic archetypal person, not quite a person, almost more elven, I guess. Really interesting. I'll talk a lot more about Gwyneth as we go on. Here's another image of Gwyneth, a beautiful colour, full-page colour artwork by John Howe. I don't know whether you can see that, but some of the way this character is portrayed, in actual fact, because she is an archetype, she's not actually a real character, a real person, so she doesn't really grow in the novel or change, and she probably has more in bearing, in keeping with almost like 1950s to 1960s comic book style heroic characters. She is sort of a superhero character, almost in that tradition of a 1950s, 60s comic book style, I guess, which has weaknesses and strengths, doesn't it? Some of the weaknesses you can probably see from the actual image, the way that John Howe has chosen to depict her. So the book itself, look at this lovely gold ribbon from Folio, the lovely silk ribbon to mark your place. I thought, I can't do a review of a work like this without reading a short passage to give an idea. There are certain characters in this book, probably all the characters in this book are more archetypes. They're not really real people, even the humans. The father who's in the beginning of the novel, and of course Christian and Stephen, the two sons of the father, and this triumvirate of characters are wandering in and out of this wood, and the novel is all about their explorations of discovery, if you like, their relationship with the forest, the wood, and the archetypal characters who inhabit it. But if the characterization in the novel is not strong, they're not really real people that grow and change and respond to their environment. Really, all of the characters are archetypes, I think. But the wood itself, the forest, the primeval, the Celtic wood, it is a major character in this book. The way Robert Holdstock describes, the visual imagery and the smell imagery in particular. This is a forest, a primeval, ancient forest that as you read this novel, you not only see it and travel through it, but you smell it. All that rotting decay and rot, the dung, the rotting leaves, the fungus. The way Robert Holdstock builds up this character and describes the forest, the place of the forest, it really is a magnificent piece of place-based writing. For me, it's the real highlight of this novel. Listen to this. This is just a page, an introduction to the forest that comes very early on in the novel. Listen to this. This is Stephen talking, one of the two sons. I arrived by pony and trap at the disused railway line that skirted the edge of the extensive estate. Oak Lodge lay on the far side of the grounds, 4 miles further round the road, but accessible via the right-of-way through the estate's fields and woodlands. I intended to take an intermediate route, and so, lugging my single cram suitcase as best I could, began to walk along the grass-covered railway track, peering on occasion over the high red brick wall that marked the limit of the estate, trying to see through the gloom of the pungent pine woods. Soon this woodland and the wall vanished, and the land opened into tight, tree-bordered fields, to which I gained access across the rickety wooden stile, almost lost beneath briar and full-fruited blackberry bushes. I had to trample my way out of the public domain and so on to the south trackway that wound, skirting patchy woodland and the stream called Sticklebrook. Up the ivy-covered house that was my home. It was late morning and very hot as I came in distant sight of Oak Lodge. Somewhere off to my left, I could hear the drone of a tractor. I thought of old Alfonso Jeffries, the estate's farm supervisor, and with the memory of his weather-tanned, smiling face came images of the mill pond and the fishing for pike from our tiny rowing boat. Memory of the tranquil mill pond haunted me, and I moved away from the south track through the waist-high nettles and a tangle of ash and hawthorn scrub. I came out close to the bank of the wide, shadowy pool, a full extent hidden by the gloom of the dense stand of oak woodland that began on its far side. Almost hidden among the rushes that crowded the nearer edge of the pond was the shallow boat from which Chris and I had fished years before. Its white paint had flaked away almost entirely now, and although the craft looked watertight, I doubted if it would take the weight of a full-grown man. I didn't disturb it, but walked around the bank and sat down on the rough concrete steps of the crumpling boathouse. From here, I watched the surface of the pool, rippling with the darting motions of insects and the occasional passage of fish just below. Oh, it's magnificent descriptive writing, I think, isn't it? The main strength of this novel is, as I said, the description of this ancient primeval, this Celtic forest into the woods. Oh boy. This is a fantastic example of place-based writing. Oh boy. All right. Some thoughts on the actual novel itself. As I said, it really is a description of this primary oak and woodland, this deciduous forest of oak, ash and elder and rowan and hawthorn and all the rest. All those fungus and, bracken fern and everything growing in this ancient forest. You particularly get to smell it. The way he describes smell, it is really uniquely remarkable in Robert Holdstock's writing style. I don't think I've ever read a novel that has so many references to the sense of smell. It's remarkable in this book. And the forest itself is set in Herefordshire. And the elementals, these archetypal forces that inhabit this ancient deciduous forest, they come in force, hovering, probing, almost more elven than human. And they are called, in this world, they are called these archetypes, these ancient spirits of the forest. In this world, they are called the Mythagos. So it is Mythago Forest. The Mythago Wood is the name of this ancient forest. And these ancient archetypal spirits, beasts who inhabit this world are also called, after the wood, the Mythagos. And they are like a poltergeist activity of uncanny and immense proportions. The ghouls and ghosts of the forest edge. And oh boy, as well as describing the forest, the way Robert Holdstock really creates these archetypal ancient characters that inhabit this wood. It is remarkable. It is, this, as I said, the main strength of the book. The way the forest is described and the world of magic, the interaction with these archetypal ancient spirits, if you like, that inhabit the forest. At one stage, Stephen, he gets a World War II fighter pilot, a hero from the battle for Britain. He gets this World War II, because this novel is set during and just after World War II. So he gets this pilot who's still flying planes after World War II to fly him over the forest to see what they can see. Flying over Ryhope Wood, or Mythago Wood, as I said, Mythago Wood. Looking down through the eerie light, I saw clearings, glades, a river flowing, a vision almost obscured by the supernatural forces that guarded it. This wood itself is described in the novel. It's almost like a portal to this ancient, immense world, where the whole of Britain is this ancient, immense forest. this wild forest, this wild wood. It's amazing the way Robert Holdstock describes it, because in real life, the way they fly over the forest, for example, it is actually, the forest itself has a circumference of around 6 miles, so it is actually a remnant piece of forest or woodland. It's not a big place at all. The whole of the United Kingdom is cleared, really, isn't it? And Robert Holdstock doesn't pretend otherwise. But this small woodland of around 6 miles circumference, so around 11 kilometers circumference around it, it is a portal to this ancient world, this immense forest of immense proportions and wildness. It's an astounding book, and it's because the antlered shaman that goes through it. It is a haunted wood, a ghost wood, and we have all these trackways through the forest that, as I said, are like ways through vortices that take you to this ancient, immense world. And he now talks about, the rank with the smell of dirt and wood. And then there is this sadness that is grown to a fury. Guy Wenneth, the superhero type girl that we talked about before. And she's not a girl at all, although in the world of Robert Holdstock, she's always described as a girl, which is one of the weaknesses of the book, because she's actually a young woman. But she's not really quite described in those independent, adult, mature terms by Robert Holdstock, which is a weakness in the book, unfortunately. But he says, Robert Holdstock says, this girl, Guy Wenneth, was beautiful, with long and red hair, skin pale and smooth. And there was this antlered god who breathed fire and revenge into Guy Wenneth. And she had the seed of changing. She had the strength of thunder, and she can change her appearance into a hawk at will. So she is this skin changer, this incredible character who goes through the world of this novel. This young woman who, unfortunately, as I said, Holdstock always describes as this young girl. It's crazy. If only he could have seen that. Anyway, the antlered helmet, the leader of the night hunt. We hung hawthorn and birch twigs over every door and window to keep out the ghosts. This is the sense of magic, the uncanny magic, the frightening sense. This is a really wild forest that they are living very close to, and you have to have certain guards and protection from it. It's just really interesting the way it's all described. But then, unfortunately, the descriptions of the forest as a piece of place-based writing, it is magnificent. But here we get the description again of Guy Wenneth. She is a girl, a child. And later on we're told that she's a handy little girl. It's so sad that Robert Holdstock didn't see this as a major weakness, because Guy Wenneth, as I said, she really is like a superhero, comes straight out of those comic books from the 1950s and 60s. She is a type of Amazon, a Wonder Woman who can do all sorts of things, and she learns different languages, and she inhabits the space, and she certainly has bodily autonomy. The way Robert Holdstock describes that aspect is fantastic. There's no body shaming. There's nothing about sexual purity or anything like that. She does have different sexual partners, not just Stephen, one of the two brothers. So it is a really interesting mix of weaknesses and strengths, this book. Guy Wenneth herself, she tells Stephen, I am not flesh and bone. I am not like you. The wood protects me, rules me. I am wood and rock. And she also tells later on, she tells Stephen that she is made of wood and rock, but she is also made apparently of sweet acorns, crushed honeybees, and the nectar of bluebells. Oh, Guy Wenneth, she's an amazing character. A really strong Wonder Woman, Amazon type character who inhabits these pages of this novel. And then, again, the magic system in this book. We are told that to control the magic and to help keep ghosts away, there are these magic talismans that you can keep with you. And the talismans are a hole in a stone, an eye on a bone, a ring made of thorn, and the sound of a forge. Oh, these talismans that control the magic and keep the wild magic from the forest at bay and not come into the house of Oak Lodge. Oh my goodness, these talismans. A hole in a stone, an eye on a bone, a ring made of thorn, and the sound of a forge. Oh, the way Robert Holdstock captures and creates this wild, ancient, Celtic type magic. It is remarkable, I think. And we have these Bronze Age guardians of the river fords, these routeways through the wood. And there is this occult nature of the wood that is so well described by Holdstock. And in the middle of this forest, there is an ancient broch made of heavy blocks of stone with lintel, intricately carved. And I loved all the description of this broch. For those who don't know, I'm a mad time team. In the UK, there's this remarkable program that's been running for over 30 years called Time Team. It's a 3-day dig, and every week it's a dig in a different location. It's a remarkable program showing archaeologists at work and celebrating the ancient past of the United Kingdom. Time Team is remarkable, and there are quite a few time teams where they go to an ancient broch and they excavate the broch. Brochs are particularly known up in Scotland, in the Scottish Highlands. They're usually a circular tower type structure, often with double skin of heavy stone lined walls. So double skinned to keep out the wet and the cold. As I said, they're usually located in Scotland, these brochs. But this woodland here in Herefordshire, it also at its heart has this ancient broch. The brochs, I think, maybe were Neolithic, but mainly they're associated with the sort of Bronze Age, and in particular with the Iron Age people. So they were going right through, not only the Iron Age, but right through in Scotland at least, right through, of course, the Roman period. The Scottish Highlands that never were subjected to Roman rule. They did lots of trading with the Romans, but there the Scots, the Celts and the Picts remained independent. And a lot of that independence was centered around these ancient brochs, these type of circular towers that built up out of double stone built walls, remarkable structures. And there is this heavy smell of the forest. The smell was rank and cloying, heavy with rotting leaves and dung, the rotting hulk of trees. Oh boy. The way Robert Holdstock creates this place. This is Mythago Wood. This is a remarkable example of place-based writing. I think the genres that most associate in my mind, in the 1970s and 80s into the 90s, there was a very popular United Kingdom writer called Alan Garner. Alan Garner was not predominantly a adult fantasy writer. He was much more a YA fantasy writer, with such incredible books as The Weirdstone of Brisingamen, The Moon of Gomrath, what fantastic titles, Elidor, Redshift, and the Stone Book. Alan Garner wrote some remarkable things, and I think as a parallel writer, this book, Mythago Wood, this is an adult work of fantasy, very much a work of mythic or Jungian fantasy, but it does have a lot in common. It reminds me a lot, anyway, of Alan Garner. I love Alan Garner, and like Robert Holdstock, unfortunately, Alan Garner is a writer who was once extremely popular. He was a best-selling work of YA fantasy, and not many people read Alan Garner anymore, which is a shame. I think the same as Robert Holdstock. He has got into trouble for his representation of gender and for his use of violence in the world of the novel sometimes. So it's that representation of gender in particular that has really, I suppose, brought Robert Holdstock and Alan Garner a little bit undone. I hope they are not completely forgotten though. You know, if you can bring that critical reading mind to bear and you can still read the books and remember these things, but, you know, interrogate the representation of gender and the role of violence in the world. I think you can do that. The other thing that this really reminds me of is Lord Dunsany's The King of Elfland's Daughter, which I did a video on several months ago. So this book, Mythago Wood by Robert Holdstock, it reminds me a lot, even though this is an adult work, but it does remind me a lot of the YA fantasy worlds created by Alan Garner, and of course by, as I said, the other adult work of fantasy of this period, Lord Dunsany's The King of Elfland's Daughter. Mythago Wood. This is a remarkable novel. It is the beginning, it's the first novel in a cycle. So it's not a sequence like Lord of the Rings that tells one story from start to finish. The 5 books that are in this cycle are all parallel with one another, and they have 5 different perspectives, viewpoints if you like, looking at different characters who all inhabit exactly the same place and time. So you get this wood, the place that's happening, what's happening inside this wood, from these 5 different perspectives, all set at about the same time as each other. So the best way to see the 5 books that make up the Mythago Wood universe is a cycle, not a sequence or a series. And this is part 1 of this remarkable cycle of novels set around Mythago Wood. I would really recommend it. It's a fantastic example of place-based writing. Robert Holdstock, Mythago Wood. This is a remarkable book. Thank you for joining me and stopping by. Thank you and bye for now.